how are our schools funded at a high level here locally?
Sure. So, Act 388 took a lot of the funding off of the local homeowner. It used to be that your home's property taxes paid for schools just like they pay for law enforcement or any other services that you get at your home. But it shifted more to a sales tax type model. And so unless you rent your home or unless you own a small business, there's very little of your home's property taxes that go to school operations.
Right.
So the General Assembly allocates dollars to us that come on a per pupil basis. And then the federal government allocates funds to the state also that come on a per pupil basis. And so there's a weighted pupil formula, which is way more complicated than when you talk about in 15 minutes. But essentially, different needs that students have come with additional dollars to help support those needs. So a child that might need special education or actually gifted talented students may have different funding formulas. And then the district kind of calculates all that out. And then what we are generally left with is what's called the index of tax-paying ability. So the General Assembly says, this is what you should do. And then the school district says, well, the difference between what you've given us and what you want us to do is X. And we will have to come up with X on the local level. And so that's where the local millage would come from. And we try really hard not to increase millage. And in fact, the last 6 years, we've seen the lowest millage increase rate of since Act 388 started, because I think school board members in particular have been very sensitive to passing all of that on small businesses is just an unfair way to build a budget.
Yeah.
But typically there is a need, it's a difference between what we've been funded and what it might cost to provide health insurance to your employees.
Right.
So we try to work through that. Facilities are funded a little differently, and so you do have a facility bill on your home property taxes.
Right. Okay. And I know that's that gets, like I said, it gets very complicated very quickly. But I think that's a great kind of high level look at. I mean, there is some state component, and then you at the local level are sort of tasked with whatever the state doesn't fund. You've got to figure out where's that coming from. Do we have to cut the budget, or are we going to have to look at some millage rate increase? So speaking of the facilities costs, let's talk about facilities. Where do you see things going? Because obviously lots of people coming here. Schools were already, I would say, probably pretty crowded. So what's the plan moving forward over the next few years?
Luckily, when Greenville County created Vision 2040, we were a part of that group. And so we knew, 2 decades ago that the county was anticipating growth in ways that we had not really been seeing on the local level. And so a lot of our schools, like Fountain High School, we were able to build ahead of some of those growth needs. But even that school is not going to be able to keep up with the growth that's happening in the Golden Strip area.
Right.
We met with some of the mayors and city council people in Malden, Simpsonville, and Fountain Inn. And just between the 3 groups, they could name, 8,000 new starts that were happening somewhere in their area that we didn't even have on our list because they had not yet been approved.
Right.
And so, that's a lot of folks. Generally, for every 200 homes that are built in a typical neighborhood, for every 500 homes that are built in a typical neighborhood, you can expect about 200 of those to have a student in school.
Okay.
So, about 40%.
Yeah.
And so when we start talking about 7,000 new starts, we're talking about a new elementary school that needs to be built.
Right.
And so we've been looking at our long range facility plan, particularly around that area. We like homeowners can't find land to build a 50-acre school. So how can we grow our current sites and expand them? So I think if you look at our long range facility plan, that's what you're going to see is a lot of expansions. Robert E. Cashin just got an expansion. Fountain High School, which we just opened with our freshman class last year, will need an expansion in the next 10 years in order to keep up with the growth that's happening. So a brand new school that was built to accommodate future growth will be full before we really get the first senior class graduates.